The ache had become such a constant companion that Clara barely noticed it anymore, the way one might grow accustomed to the hum of a refrigerator or the distant thrum of city traffic. It was a low, persistent throb behind her ribs, a ghost of a pain that had taken up residence 2 years, 4 months, and 11 days ago. She knew the exact date because it was the day she had finally admitted to herself, in the silent, unforgiving clarity of a 3 a.m. stare at her bedroom ceiling, that she was irrevocably in love with her best friend. Her very straight, very taken best friend, Maya. Being Maya's confidant was a special kind of self-inflicted torture. It was like being a priest in a confessional, tasked with absolving the sins of a world from which she was fundamentally excluded. Tonight was no different. They were curled on opposite ends of their worn, gray sofa, a bowl of half-eaten popcorn between them, and a terrible romantic comedy flickering on the screen, forgotten. "He just doesn't get it," Maya said, her voice a soft, frustrated sigh that seemed to curl into the air and dissipate. She was pulling at a loose thread on one of the floral cushions, her brow furrowed. "I try to explain how I'm feeling, what I need, and it's like I'm speaking another language. He hears the words, Clara, but he doesn't listen." Clara's heart did a familiar, painful twist. The name Daniel was a stone in her shoe, a constant irritant. She wanted to tell Maya that she deserved someone who listened with their whole being, someone who could read the unspoken sentences in the spaces between her words. She wanted to say, "I listen. I always listen." Instead, she offered the same placating, supportive friend advice she always did. "Have you tried telling him that? Just like you told me." Maya scoffed, a humorless little sound. 100 times. He just pats my hand and says I'm overthinking things. He thinks love is supposed to be easy. Simple. Like a checklist you complete. She finally looked up, her warm brown eyes, usually so full of light, clouded with a wistful sort of confusion. Is it supposed to be so much work? Real love? Or is it supposed to feel safe? The question hung in the air, so earnest and vulnerable it felt like a physical thing. It was a knife, turning gently in that old, familiar ache. Safe is exactly what it should feel like, Clara wanted to scream. It should feel like this. Like us on this couch, like knowing you can say anything and I'll understand. "I think," Clara began, choosing her words as if disarming a bomb, "I think it's supposed to be both. It takes work, but the work itself should feel safe. Like building a house, not fighting a war." Maya considered this, her gaze distant. She was so beautiful it hurt. The dim light from the television caught the gold flecks in her eyes and traced the soft curve of her jaw. Clara had long ago memorized every plane of her face, every shift in her expression. It was a form of devotion, this silent cataloging of another person's soul. She felt like a ghost in her own life, haunting the edges of Maya's, visible but not truly seen. Tonight, the ache was not a dull throb. It was sharp, and it was demanding to be noticed. The movie credits began to roll, casting a soft, blue glow across the room. For a long moment, there was only the sound of their breathing and the gentle, melancholic score from the television. Clara was about to suggest they call it a night, to retreat to the separate solitudes of their bedrooms where she could let the mask of supportive friend dissolve. But then Maya shifted, turning her body fully toward Clara, tucking her feet beneath her on the cushion. The energy in the room changed, became denser, more focused. "Can I ask you something weird?" Maya's voice was barely a whisper. Clara's heart rate kicked up a notch. "You can ask me anything." It was her mantra, her promise, her curse. Maya hesitated, worrying her lower lip with her teeth, a habit she had when she was nervous or deeply thoughtful. The sight sent a jolt of pure, unadulterated longing through Clara's veins. "It's just from the movie. And what we were talking about. All the stuff about connection and chemistry." "Okay," Clara said slowly, her throat suddenly dry. Maya finally met her gaze, her eyes searching Clara's face as if looking for an answer she wasn't sure she wanted. "Clara," she said, her name a soft inquiry. Have you ever kissed a girl?" The world tilted on its axis. The question wasn't accusatory or teasing. It was curious. It was intensely, terrifyingly genuine. Of all the late-night conversations they had ever had, they had never crossed this particular line. It was an invisible boundary Clara had been careful to reinforce, terrified of giving herself away. Now Maya had just stepped right over it, casually and completely, and was waiting on the other side. Clara felt the blood drain from her face and then rush back, hot and prickling. 1,000 possible answers swirled in her mind. She could lie. She could deflect with a joke. She could pretend she hadn't heard. But looking into Maya's wide, expectant eyes, she knew she couldn't. It would feel like a betrayal of the very intimacy Maya was questioning. So she gave her the truth. A small, fragile piece of it. She swallowed, the sound loud in the sudden silence of the room. Her own voice came out a little shaky, a little breathless. "Yes," she said. Just the one word. It landed between them with the weight of a stone dropped into a still pond. The ripples spread out, touching everything. Clara held her breath, bracing for the reaction, for the awkward laugh, the hasty retreat, the polite but definitive friend-zoning that would surely follow. But that wasn't what happened. Maya didn't pull away. She didn't laugh. Her gaze, which had been locked on Clara's, flickered down for a fraction of a second, a fleeting glance toward Clara's mouth before returning to her eyes. And then, slowly, deliberately, she drew her own lower lip between her teeth and bit down. Gently. It was not her nervous habit. It was something else entirely. A silent, unguarded response that sent a shockwave of pure electricity through Clara's entire body. The air crackled. The ache in her chest wasn't a throb of pain anymore. It was the gut-wrenching, terrifying, exhilarating swell of hope. And in that moment, the entire foundation of their friendship trembled, threatening to shatter and reform into something new, something breathtaking, something she had only ever allowed herself to dream about. The silence that followed stretched into an eternity. Clara's mind was a hurricane of what-ifs and oh-gods. Maya's small, almost imperceptible action had rewritten every rule of their shared universe. That single, fleeting gesture was louder than any confession. It was a question mark hanging in the air, a dare. Maya finally released her lip, her expression unreadable. It was a mixture of curiosity, vulnerability, and something else Clara couldn't name, something wild and uncertain. "Oh," Maya breathed out, the word a puff of air. It wasn't a dismissal. It was a discovery. "Yeah," Clara managed, her voice still thin. She felt completely exposed, as if Maya's question had peeled back a layer of her skin, leaving her nerves raw and open to the air. She needed to retreat, to find solid ground, but she was paralyzed. What was it like?" Maya asked, her voice hushed, intimate. She leaned forward just a fraction, a barely measurable shift, but Clara felt it like a magnetic pull. How could she possibly answer that? How could she describe the nervous thrill, the softness, the way it had felt both strange and inexplicably right? How could she explain that every kiss she had ever had with a woman paled in comparison to the kiss she imagined, nightly, with the woman sitting in front of her? It was different, Clara said, opting for a safe, vague honesty. Softer. Less demanding, I guess. Maya nodded slowly, her eyes never leaving Clara's. Less demanding, she repeated, tasting the words. "I think I know what you mean." She seemed to be having a conversation with herself, her gaze turning inward for a moment. "Daniel's kisses are an announcement. Like he's planting a flag." The comparison was so stark, so brutally honest, that it knocked the air from Clara's lungs. A flag. An act of possession. It was everything she imagined love with Maya wouldn't be. Love with Maya would be a conversation, a question and an answer, a shared breath. The dam of their carefully constructed friendship had a crack in it, and the unspoken was beginning to trickle through. The following week was a study in exquisite tension. Nothing was said about that night, but everything had changed. The air between them was charged, heavy with potential. Touches that had once been casual now lingered, imbued with new meaning. They were watching a movie again a few days later, a tense thriller this time. As the suspense on screen mounted, Maya, without a word, shifted closer until her shoulder was pressed firmly against Clara's. The contact was a brand. Clara could feel the warmth of Maya's skin through the thin fabric of their shirts, a steady, radiating heat that seemed to seep directly into her bones. She focused on the movie, on breathing, on anything other than the riot of sensation erupting from that simple point of contact. Then Maya's hand, which had been resting on the cushion between them, moved. Her fingers brushed against Clara's. It was a feather-light touch, so brief it could have been an accident. Clara's entire nervous system lit up. She didn't pull away. She didn't breathe. After a moment that felt like a lifetime, Maya's fingers tentatively brushed against hers again, and this time, they stayed. Her pinky finger hooked around Clara's. It was the smallest, most hesitant gesture of intimacy, but it felt monumental. A silent question. Clara responded by slowly, carefully, uncurling her own fingers and letting their hands settle together, palms not quite touching, but fingers loosely intertwined. A current passed between them, a low, humming electricity that drowned out the sound of the movie, the city outside, everything. They sat like that for the rest of the film, connected by that fragile, electrifying bridge, neither of them acknowledging it, both of them utterly consumed by it. The conversations changed, too. They grew deeper, more philosophical. One evening, while doing the dishes, Maya turned to her, a soapy plate in her hand, her expression serious. "Do you ever feel like you're playing a part?" she asked. "Like, you know the lines you're supposed to say, the person you're supposed to be in a relationship, but it feels like a costume." Clara paused, her hands submerged in the warm water. "All the time," she admitted quietly. The confession felt risky, but the new, charged atmosphere between them seemed to demand honesty. "With Daniel, I feel like I'm the girlfriend," Maya continued, staring at the plate as if it held all the answers. "I'm supportive, I'm patient, I'm understanding. But I don't feel like me. I feel more like myself right now, washing dishes with you, than I do when he's telling me he loves me." The words struck Clara with the force of a physical blow. Hope, fierce and terrifying, surged through her. She was starting to see the architecture of Maya's unhappiness, and its blueprint looked startlingly like a life that was missing someone like her. She started noticing other things too. Little things. The way Maya's gaze would soften when Clara was talking passionately about a book she loved. The way Maya started wearing the soft, lavender-scented lotion Clara used, filling their shared space with a fragrance that was now inextricably linked to them both. And then there were the moments when Clara would catch Maya looking at her lips. It was never for long, just a quick, almost imperceptible flicker of a glance, but it happened more and more frequently. During a conversation in the kitchen. Across the dinner table. Once, when Clara was laughing at one of Maya's jokes, her head thrown back, she opened her eyes to find Maya staring at her mouth with an expression of such raw, undisguised longing that it made her own breath catch in her throat. Maya had blushed and looked away immediately, but the image was burned into Clara's memory. The escalation reached a tipping point a week later. The breakup with Daniel, when it came, was less of an explosion and more of a quiet, inevitable collapse. Maya called Clara from her car, her voice thick with tears, but underpinned by a strange, resolute calm. "It's over," she said simply. "I ended it. Are you okay?" Clara asked, her heart pounding a frantic, complicated rhythm of concern and elation. "I will be," Maya said, and then, can I just come home?" Home. The word echoed in the small space of Clara's heart. When Maya walked through the door 20 minutes later, her eyes were red-rimmed, but her shoulders were set. She didn't fall apart. She walked straight into Clara's arms and held on, burying her face in the crook of Clara's neck. Clara held her back, her hands stroking Maya's hair, murmuring soft, comforting nonsense. It felt different from every other comfort hug they had ever shared. There was no space between them. It wasn't just comfort, it was a homecoming. It was an anchor. Later that night, they were sitting on Maya's bed, surrounded by a fortress of pillows. The storm of the breakup had passed, leaving a quiet, introspective calm in its wake. Maya hadn't cried again. Instead, she seemed lighter, as if a great weight had been lifted. "Thank you," Maya whispered into the dim light of her bedroom. "For everything. For being you. Always, Clara whispered back. Maya turned to face her, her expression open and achingly vulnerable. Clara, she began, her voice trembling slightly. For the past few weeks, I've been so confused. I thought it was just Daniel, that our relationship was wrong. But it's more than that. She took a shaky breath. I think the reason it never worked with him, with anyone, is because I was looking for the wrong things. In the wrong people. Clara's world narrowed to the space between them, to the soft glow of the bedside lamp on Maya's face. This was it. The point of no return. I've been thinking, Maya continued, her eyes searching Clara's, pleading for understanding. About what you said. About kissing a girl. About it being softer. Her gaze dropped, just for a second, to Clara's mouth. I've been thinking about kissing you. A lot. The confession hung in the air, a beautiful, terrifying truth. Clara's heart felt like it was going to beat its way out of her chest. This was everything she had ever wanted to hear, but the reality of it was so overwhelming, so potent, that it stole her breath. Fear and hope were warring so violently inside her that she couldn't speak. What if she was misreading this? What if this was just post-breakup confusion? The fear of losing Maya completely, of shattering their friendship for good, was a cold hand gripping her heart. In the face of Maya's raw vulnerability, Clara's own terror made her flinch. It was a tiny, almost invisible reaction, a slight stiffening of her shoulders, a flicker of panic in her eyes. But Maya saw it. The soft hope in Maya's expression faltered, replaced by a flicker of uncertainty, of hurt. And Clara, seeing that hurt, felt a fresh wave of self-loathing. She was so afraid of the fall that she couldn't even reach for the hand being offered to her. Over the next few days, a new, agonizing distance grew between them. It was a silence born not of comfort, but of fear. Clara, paralyzed by the enormity of what was happening, retreated into herself. She made herself busy. She took extra shifts at the bookstore where she worked. She came home late and left early. She avoided the late-night talks, the movie nights, the casual intimacy that had become their lifeline. Every time she saw Maya, she saw the confession hanging in her eyes, and the hope warring with the hurt, and her own cowardice felt like a physical weight in her stomach. She was hiding, and they both knew it. The confrontation came on a rainy Tuesday evening. Clara had just gotten home, dripping and exhausted, hoping to slip into her room unnoticed. But Maya was waiting for her in the living room, standing by the window, watching the rain streak down the glass. The television was off. The apartment was unnervingly quiet. "We can't keep doing this," Maya said, her voice quiet but firm. She didn't turn around. Clara froze by the doorway, her jacket dripping onto the welcome mat. "Doing what?" she asked, though she knew exactly what. Maya finally turned, and her face was a canvas of frustration and pain. This avoidance. "You've been a ghost for days, Clara. You're hiding from me, and I want to know why." Her voice broke on the last word, raw with an emotion that was too big for the room. "I laid my entire heart out for you, told you things I've never told anyone, and you just disappeared." The accusation, so true and so fair, shattered the last of Clara's defenses. The guilt was suffocating. "I'm sorry," she whispered, the words feeling pitifully inadequate. "Don't be sorry," Maya said, taking a step closer. The air vibrated between them. "Be honest. What aren't you telling me? What are you so afraid of?" The direct question, the raw need in Maya's eyes, left Clara with nowhere left to run. All the fear, all the longing, all the carefully suppressed emotions of the past 2 years came rushing to the surface. Tears pricked at her eyes, hot and unwelcome. "You," she choked out, the single word a ragged confession. "I'm afraid of you." Maya's expression softened from frustration into confusion. "Of me? Why?" And so, the whole truth came tumbling out, messy and unstoppable. "Because I am so completely in love with you that I can't breathe," Clara said, the words spilling out in a rush before she could stop them. "And I have been for 3 years. 3 years, Maya. Listening to you talk about Daniel, patching you up after fights, pretending that being your best friend was enough when it was killing me. And the other night, when you said you'd been thinking of kissing me, it was everything I've ever wanted. And it terrified me. Because if I was wrong, if I misunderstood, I would lose you. And I can't lose you. You're everything. She was openly crying now, tears tracking down her cold cheeks. She stood there, utterly exposed, her heart laid bare on the floor between them, waiting to be either accepted or crushed. The silence that followed was absolute. Maya just stared at her, her own eyes filling with tears. But they weren't tears of pity or shock. They were tears of dawning, overwhelming realization. A single tear escaped and traced a path down her cheek. She didn't move, didn't speak, just looked at Clara as if seeing her for the very first time. Then, slowly, she closed the distance between them. She stopped just inches away, so close Clara could feel the warmth radiating from her, could smell the faint scent of lavender and rain. She gently reached up, her fingers cool against Clara's tear-stained cheek, and wiped away a tear with her thumb. 3 years. Maya whispered, her voice thick with wonder. Oh, Clara. It wasn't a rejection. It was a lament. A lament for lost time. I'm so stupid, Maya breathed, a sad, wondrous laugh escaping her. All this time I felt like something was missing. I thought it was me. I thought I was broken, that I couldn't love properly. But it wasn't me that was missing. She looked directly into Clara's soul. It was you. Clara's heart stopped. And then it started again, with a beat so pure and strong it felt like the first beat of a new life. Maya's other hand came up to cup the other side of Clara's face, holding her with an infinite tenderness. Her gaze dropped to Clara's mouth, and this time, it stayed there. There was no hesitation, no flicker. Only certainty. Clara, she whispered, her voice a fragile plea. Can I kiss you? Please. Clara couldn't find her voice. She could only nod, a shaky, desperate movement. And then Maya leaned in and pressed her lips to hers. It was nothing like Clara had imagined, and it was everything. It wasn't a flag being planted. It was a prayer being answered. The first touch was impossibly soft, hesitant, a question. It tasted of salt from their tears and the sweetness of rain. It was a quiet acknowledgement of all the years of silence, of all the unspoken longing. Clara's hands, which had been hanging uselessly at her sides, came up to rest on Maya's waist, pulling her closer, closing the last fraction of an inch between them. She kissed her back, a release of every feeling she had ever suppressed. The kiss deepened, the initial tentative gentleness melting away into something more certain, more urgent. It was a conversation held without words, a story of waiting and finding and finally coming home. It was the frantic beat of two hearts finally speaking the same language. It was relief so profound it felt like absolution. When they finally broke apart, they were both breathless. They rested their foreheads together, their breathing ragged, their tears mingling. The air around them was still, peaceful. The storm, both outside and in, had passed. Oh, Maya breathed out, her eyes still closed. Wow. Yeah, Clara whispered, a watery laugh bubbling up from her chest. That felt. Maya trailed off, searching for the word. Right. Clara finished for her, her voice full of a certainty she had never known. It felt right. Maya opened her eyes, and they were shining with a light so bright it eclipsed everything else. I'm so sorry, she whispered. For not seeing it. For not seeing you. Don't be, Clara said, stroking a thumb over Maya's hip. We're here now. A shadow of fear crossed Maya's face. I'm terrified, she admitted, her voice small. Of what this means. Of changing everything. Me too, Clara confessed, her own fear a quiet hum beneath the soaring joy. But I'm not scared of this, she looked pointedly at the small space between their lips. I'm not scared of you. A real smile, the first genuine, unburdened smile Clara had seen on her face in months, spread across Maya's lips. Good. Me neither, she leaned in and kissed her again, slower this time, more deliberate. It was a kiss of beginning. A promise. They talked for hours after that, curled up on the sofa where it had all begun. They untangled the past, recontextualizing years of friendship through this new, brilliant lens. Now I get it, Maya said, her head resting in Clara's lap, her fingers tracing idle patterns on Clara's jeans. Every time I complained to you about Daniel. I wasn't just looking for a friend to vent to. She looked up at Clara, her eyes wide with the clarity of her realization. I was measuring him against you. I was holding up our connection, this ease we have, and wondering why I couldn't have that with him. They all came up short, every single one of them, because the standard was you. The confession settled into Clara's heart, not with a twist of pain, but with a feeling of profound rightness. All those nights of quiet suffering had not been for nothing. They had been the foundation. So, what do we do now? Clara asked softly, her fingers carding through Maya's silky hair. Maya looked around their apartment, at the familiar gray sofa, the half-dead plant in the corner, the stack of books on the coffee table. She looked at Clara's face, her home. We figure it out, she said with a newfound bravery. Together. We take it one day at a time, and we don't hide anymore. She sat up, a determined glint in her eye. I'm done playing roles. I just want to be me with you. 3 weeks later, the world had settled into a new, beautiful rhythm. The sun streamed through the kitchen window, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. The apartment smelled of coffee and vanilla, a scent that was now unequivocally theirs. Clara stood at the counter, watching as Maya poured steamed milk into 2 mugs, her movements easy and practiced. The ghost of Daniel was gone, not just from their conversations, but from the very atmosphere of their home. The space he had once occupied in Maya's life, and therefore in Clara's, had been filled with something infinitely more real and vibrant. Maya turned, holding out a mug, and her smile was soft and private, meant only for Clara. It was a smile Clara was getting used to, but it still made her heart do a little flip every single time. There was no tension in Maya's shoulders, no confusion in her eyes. There was only a deep, abiding peace. Morning, Maya murmured, her lips brushing Clara's in a gentle, familiar kiss that still sent a jolt of quiet electricity through her. Morning, Clara replied, leaning into the touch. They stood there for a moment in the morning light, wrapped in a comfortable silence, the warmth of the mugs seeping into their hands. It was so simple, so ordinary. And it was the most extraordinary thing Clara had ever known. All those years of aching, of watching from the sidelines, had felt like a form of purgatory. She had believed she was a ghost, haunting the edges of the life she truly wanted. But she saw now that she had not been a ghost at all. She had been an anchor, a constant, waiting patiently for the person she loved to find her way through the fog. Maya leaned her head on Clara's shoulder, sighing contentedly. You know, she said, her voice a low murmur against Clara's neck, for someone who was so terrified, you seem to have settled into this pretty well. Clara smiled, turning her head to press a kiss to Maya's hair. She thought of the fear, the years of longing, the single question that had changed everything. She thought of the courage it had taken for both of them to cross that line, to step into the terrifying and beautiful unknown. The ache was gone, replaced by a wholeness so complete it felt like it had always been there, just waiting to be uncovered. Well, Clara said, her voice full of a quiet, unshakable joy. I guess I'm exactly where I need to be. Maya squeezed her hand in agreement, a silent confirmation that echoed in the sunlit kitchen. She understood, then, that home wasn't a place. It was this. It was a person. It was a feeling of safety so profound that even the most frightening dares led to the most beautiful discoveries. She was finally home.